I'm glad to be here today, and exactly as Paul said, glad to share a little bit more about our thinking about what else you might want to consider when you're optimizing. And so, without further ado, for anyone who doesn't know me already, hi, my name's Cadi, and I look after the commercial part of our business over in based out of London, but across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And in terms of, Paul teed it up quite nicely, but we're going to start really digging into optimization today. And I think we normally, whenever we've done sort of presentations before focusing on optimization, we've really focused on the sort of the bit that I've actually taken out of being highlighted here. You know, most of these presentations on optimization really focus on cost efficiency. But actually, in the real world, it can be about performance within other given constraints as it's defined here. And I think that's really what we want to dig into with you today. And I know what you're thinking. I see we've already got a chat already. I bet it's someone saying, but optimization is all about price, right? If you've ever been on like ad tech Twitter, pretty much every other day, some wise guy is going to come on there and say, you know, it's all about the price. If you've got to hit a performance goal, you've just got to bid cheaply and get a ton of reach. And in some ways, traditionally price really has been the main focus. But I think what we're seeing at Beeswax is now we're at a level of maturity with programmatic that people are kind of are wising up to this. Brands who are investing in programmatic, not only, you know, as the sort of dominant mechanism for them buying media, often are having real thoughts about other metrics that are important to them, thinking about the quality of the supply as programmatic has really moved into that sort of premium space. Price is one important element, but there are actually a lot of other things that you can consider. And so particularly as we're talking about premium and thinking about those premium environments, thinking about connected TV, thinking about premium video, you start to see a number of sort of different campaign objectives coming in, particularly in premium. Sort of there can be delivery commitments, spend commitments to particular partners that you want to work with. So that can definitely be one element that comes up quite a lot. Other metrics or measurements that are important to you, what you see as quality, might also be something that you care about very, very efficiently, right? You can buy lots of cheap inventory, but if none of it's any good, if it doesn't live up to your quality expectations, then that can be a really sticking point, and that can be something you may want to optimize towards. And then I think pretty much everyone who's ever touched a campaign will be used to there being multiple metrics. A customer who turns to you and say, I really care about video completion rate, but you've also, you know, like, I love clicks. I just want to see the CTR working as well. So it can be really useful to think also about the campaign objectives and how you can go about it. And so one of the ways that we've sort of facilitated thinking about these other objectives at Beeswax is by using a concept of a delivery model. There have been lots of webinars previously, maybe Paul can link them here, around bid models and using the bid price based on multiple factors as being the sort of mode for optimization. And so effectively, a bid model will allow you to set multiple parameters and specify the price in that scenario. Delivery models are kind of the same concept, but instead of thinking about the price, you're actually thinking about the distribution and the volume of delivery against those parameters for your campaign. So it's going to allow you to kind of finally control the distribution of your programmatic advertising separate to the price that you bid for those ads. And so it's really ensuring that your campaign is going to deliver and deliver in full and achieve, if assuming that that's possible, where possible, achieve that split in the delivery that you're looking for. And now, again, I know there's lots of people dialing into this who know programmatic inside and out, and you're going to turn around and say to me, yeah, this is manageable already. You can just do this by breaking out additional line items. You can, but it's hardly ideal, right? Talk to any trader in your business and they will hate you for saying, right, we're going to have a separate line item for each of these, and you're going to have to manually adjust the budget between all of those combinations. So just as a bid model is allowing you to set a price for those different combinations, the delivery model is really a mechanic for reducing the number of line items and optimizing your delivery. So on the left-hand side here, you know how it works for price. You know how to optimize for price. This is something that everyone's doing. When you think about the right-hand side of the screen here, so optimizing to the delivery that hits your goal. So being able to input those instructions, but based on where you want your impressions to serve, perhaps more than thinking about specifically the price that you want to pay by that category. Hopefully everyone is following so far, because I wanted to move in now to just share a few examples of some of the things that you could consider besides the price. So when you're thinking about how you might want to structure this model, what you might want to take into account, what sort of thing should or could you be thinking about? Well, as always with Beeswax, there are a ton of different options and variables that you can use to build into those models. I'd be happy to share our sort of technical specs documentation after the call with anyone who wants to know, to see the full list. But I mean, it's really everything from sort of contextual information from the IAB content signal through to device type, model, screen size, site lists or names of exchanges. It really can be anything. So you can sort of effectively start to think about how you want to control the delivery of your campaign based on those factors. I find it quite helpful to think about them in these sort of three buckets. And as we come into some more of the practical examples of what we're seeing people doing, hopefully this will become more clear. But I think when we're thinking about temporal or time-based, we'd generally be thinking of, sort of time, so time of day, day of week. We might think about geolocation, so whether that's region or city, coming really quite granular for that sort of thing. So you might want to adjust your delivery based on those sort of signals. We talked a little bit already about this, but quality might be important to you. So you might want to think about adjusting this based on quality metrics. And that could be sort of site lists that you have for viewability, for affinity with your brand. It could be around, working with any of the other signals that are indicative of your sort of definition of quality. We also see a lot of folks focusing on this from their partnerships perspective. So thinking about whether it's a supply side platform and exchange or perhaps a publisher or group of publishers that they have some kind of relationship with, you may want to prioritize delivery to those good partners first, or in the case of supply path optimization, route the demand through a particular exchange or supply side platform first. And so those sort of partnerships piece can come into this early on as well. And so I promised Paul that we would talk about some sort of concrete examples of when you might consider optimization really towards delivery more than perhaps some other things. And I'm going to start with perhaps the example that you're not going to be expecting. I'm going to start with a pure kind of performance play. So, thinking about, sorry, my slides was just slow to update there. So thinking about a sort of direct response use case, I think any trader is really normally looking at this sort of data. They're looking at the volume of impressions they're delivering by site and the CPA that they're achieving for that. And you can see in this example here with this sample data set that we've got here, sites K, L, and I are all hitting, they're below the CPA target that we've got in here at $8. So they're doing their job and they're delivering at scale. So that's great. But imagine that scale isn't the problem, and what you actually want to do is really, really improve the performance. There are other sites where you're only delivering a small volume, but they are really, really doing a lot of work to decrease the CPA. So in this example, what is often happening with the algorithm is larger sites have more scope and they're sending more bid requests. And if they're coming in below your CPA, you're seeing a lot of delivery there just because there's more of it, right? So in this scenario, you could effectively create a delivery model to limit your delivery on these sites here, so sites K, L, and I, where you're seeing a big volume of impressions at a good CPA, but not an outstanding CPA. If you were to set up a rule effectively used in your model to reduce the volume of spend on those sites, the number of impressions that you're delivering on those sites, and instead you could then ask the model to prioritize activity on the sites at this end, so E, F, A, where they are really hitting a much lower CPA. And if you can spend more impressions, deliver more impressions on those sites, overall, your CPA is going to come down. So the net effect is going to of restricting that budget on less performance inventory means you're going to be able to focus more of your budget on the more performant inventory. So I thought it would be interesting to start with a sort of real performance use case, because it is a really good example of how price isn't necessarily the only lever that you have to play with. The next one is something that we see coming up quite a lot in Europe. Perhaps there are trading relationships that you have in place with particular publishers. Perhaps you actually have some owned and operated inventory, and you may want to set instructions that will make sure you're spending a significant volume of your budgets on your own supply, as well as then running on inventory outside of that. So in the old version that we were talking about, when you would have to have done a separate line, if you had this 10K budget, you could have set it up with one line item targeting, group one of supply. In this example, I've said that it's owned and operated, but it could just as easily be, a set of private marketplaces that you've agreed with a set of publishers with an SSP. You'd have a separate line that would target a separate chunk of deals, and that would have its own line item budget. And then perhaps you just want a little bit of budget on the open exchange. What tends to happen there is the traders are having to go in every day and manually optimize the budgets to make sure that they get to that 10K budget. And even then, if there's not enough supply, or there's something can get in the way, and maybe the last few days of the campaign run on a weekend, and then they're not running those optimizations. If you get under delivery, unless you're manually upweighting those line items, you're going to see under delivery on the campaign. So in terms of the Beeswax model, and as Paul said, there's a lot of technical documentation, there are more technical webinars on this already, but just very, very simply, taking that same ratio of 5, 4, 1, we've weighted it here, we want to spend the bulk of the supply on owned and operated. We're happy to run some deals, and then we also want to put in some open exchange activity. You effectively set up this table of instructions within your Beeswax account, and that will convert into the budget allocation. So say you got an up weight on this campaign and you're able to increase the budget from 10K to 15K, that weighting is still going to apply. And the platform will automatically optimize to achieve this delivery, while also prioritizing that your campaign delivers in full. So the number one priority is still that your campaign delivers in full. If there is not enough owned and operated supply to get there, we would try to deliver more against the deals and the open exchange in order to deliver the budget in full. But it's just taking away that manual need to always be reallocating budgets day after day, even multiple times per day within the same line item. I'm going to come into a third example now, and I touched on this earlier on, but it can be quite frequent that an advertiser will have actually multiple campaign objectives. So imagine this scenario that I touched on before, where you care about both click-through rate and video completion rate. So in terms of then managing this for delivery, generally, within the UI, you're setting up a campaign, you have to pick one. And just as we saw with the performance, if there are some sites which have high video completion rates but low click-through rates, if those are sites which are generating a high volume of bid requests, you are naturally going to see a lot of delivery there. In that scenario, you could create a bid model, create one of those, effectively a simple table with the instructions of focusing a certain portion of your delivery at the sites which have the better click-through rates. Also, then a portion of your inventory should be delivered on some sites which have a medium click-through rate. And you can still keep in a list of sites that perhaps have a low CTR if they still are making sense for the brand objectives. If you have a partnership in place there, or something else that you want to honor, you can keep that there, but you can adjust the weighting so that you're optimizing for delivery and the customer's goals, as well as their secondary goal, that click-through rate. So how can you actually go about sort of putting this into place in Beeswax? Well, what we see most of our customers doing, is actually leveraging the delivery modifiers or the delivery models alongside bid modifiers and bid models, really to sort of to drive extra impact. So you might want to have both the ability to adjust the price and the ability to shape the delivery. And so you can absolutely use these in combination for extra impact. And I think with that, I'm going to just flag that if you'd like to explore this further, because it can be quite a complicated thing to talk about, I'd really recommend you talk to your customer success manager, talk to your account manager about some of these strategies, and could you test these on your activity with us? As I said, we have a lot of technical documentation that is really helpful. So you can think about, well, what are the signals that I might want to use? What are the variables I might want to take into account? In reviewing that, that might give you some more ideas about what options you could consider. So if you do want to explore further, please talk to us about it. If you're not a current customer, I'm very happy to help and point you to the direction of one of our experts internally here. And so I think with that, I've done a double click on again, Paul, sorry, but I was going to come into to some questions.
Yeah, great. So our first, and that was really informative, thank you. I'll get to our first question. Are delivery models a replacement for pacing?
Oh, that is a really, really good question. No, absolutely not. Really, it's quite a different thing. If you think pacing being really focused on how much you are delivering every day and how you are delivering across the course of your campaign, delivery models think about more as where. So the pacing should be, how much today, how many impressions am I delivering today? And the delivery models is much more, where do I want those impressions to serve? But you're right, the pricing, pacing, and delivery are all really closely interlinked. So definitely something to think about and monitor, especially if you are testing this.
Yeah. Next question. Do you need to be quite an advanced buyer at an agency to use this functionality?
That's a really good question. Well, first up, you don't need to be at an agency. I think this is something that we're seeing lots of different types of customers use, and Beeswax does have lots of different customer types. Within an agency, I think if you're wanting to keep it simple to start with, it can be fairly simple that, if you have a set of deals that you want, if you're buying across a chunk of deals and you want to keep buying across that set of deals, and some are hitting your performance metrics better than others, it would be quite an easy thing to create that rule, to create that model that's basically splitting those deals into two lists and saying, actually, of the 100% that I'm spending on deals, I want 60% to deliver on this group of deals, which are the better performing ones. And I still want to keep some delivery on these other deals because you have commitments to those. That sort of rule is actually quite straightforward. And it's the sort of thing that you could talk to your customer success manager about, and they would be able to help you implement quite easily. You can obviously make this as complicated, significantly more complicated. And there are definitely some kind of scenarios where you may want to loop in some kind of data science resource to think through it. But it doesn't have to be. Again, it's something we try to do a lot at Beeswax, but have a sort of, a simple approach you can get started with that you can build on as you get more experience and more expertise in that area.
Mm-hmm. There's a question that's kind of related to that, sort of the level of effort required. It's, do many customers, if your customers use these models, maybe if I could add something to that question, if you could go through just a couple like really simple use cases for this. I mean, I can think about, a publisher that has O&O that they want to fulfill in a particular campaign, but before they go to open exchange inventory, if they're doing audience extension, that's something that just came to mind for me. But maybe, because I think it can seem daunting, but really it's not that hard to get started with it. So Kate, do you mind just kind of walking us through perhaps a couple of use cases that our customers benefit from?
Yeah, I think, and yes, it's a feature that is, Paul, you may have to correct me on this one. I think we launched this about a year and a bit ago. I'm going to say it's over a year old. So we have seen good adoption from our customers. Personally, as someone who has spent time hands-on keyboard optimizing, I think we could be, I would love to see people using it more. But I would say across our European book of business, somewhere between a third and half of our customers are actually building out those delivery models and using them, using them quite consistently. To Paul's point, we have some customers who are using us to at least to some extent buy their own supply. And this is a really, really useful tool there. We have other customers where they will have trading relationships in place, or volume commits to hit. This is a brilliant tool for that, because that's something that as a trader, it's actually quite painful to monitor and to put in place. But actually, if you have a delivery model that's built, it can be built by one person who's a sort of expert within the team. They can easily then push that, make that available to all of the campaigns, all of the advertisers that you're running. And so it makes it much easier to hit some of those commitments. And then yeah, I mean, we talked about it, but the performance thing is actually really, really interesting. I think where we have some customers who are really sort of direct response performance focused, it is a really, really good way of making sure that you're not delivering all of your budget on sites where, or at least the majority of your budget on big sites which have meh performance, where the performance is so. And I think that's probably the least used use case, but probably the use case where you would get maximum benefit. And so I think that's one that, as we are seeing people really focus on performance more and more, as certainly in some markets where we are sort of beginning to emerge from the pandemic and people's consumers' sort of shopping habits are changing. I think people are thinking, we're seeing people thinking again about the importance of performance in the digital media spend. And so I think that's one where, yeah, if I had a magic wand, that's the one I would love to see more people using, but we are already seeing the, the sort of pure performance focused customers looking at that.
Great. And we had a question come in through the chat that is a little tangential. So I've gone and answered in the chat, but for the benefit of everybody, I'll also answer here. The question was, can we expect more automation in the UI, like a pie chart or troubleshooter, which shows why the campaign is not scaling rather than manually troubleshooting? We actually just released a feature for this called Bid Decision Flow. We had a webinar on that, and I've put the link to that webinar you can watch on our resources page into the chat. So it's really cool. It's a great visualization that explains exactly what the question you're asking, which is, why am I not scaling? And so check that out, and I think you'll find that useful. And our last question, how to balance transparency with your client with automation of a bidding algo? What's the best way to convince clients to buy into your optimization approach versus them setting the individual line items themselves?
Gosh, that's a complex question.
It sounds like, how do I sell this to my customer? Kind of the question. How do I get them to understand that delivery is an important thing to optimize toward when they have in their head these other metrics?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think coming, I almost want to go to like a more like philosophical point on this, generally across the board, the model, the tone that Beeswax has set around transparency into the algorithm and actually opening up the black box, allowing people to build their own algorithms, whether that's through a sort of the bid models or whether that is a standalone custom bidding agent. I think there's a certain type of client that really does want to know what is happening and why you're making those decisions. And I think for those clients, you should absolutely be, be talking to them about what is possible and what they can see. And I think in terms of the best approach to then convince them to buy into your optimization approach, well, I think if they understand what is working, that's important not only for the performance of their media campaigns, but it can be quite informative into their wider business objectives. And so I would definitely expect clients that are, advertisers that are switched on and in tune, wanting to better understand what their customers and target audiences are reacting to and engaging with. I would expect them to really want to have some level of custom optimization and understand it. And I think the best thing you can do as a partner is to actually talk to them about what you're doing and show them how. From my experience, if you're doing that and you're doing that transparently, they get a lot of it builds up a lot of trust, and you are able to sort of build that relationship where they know that you are doing the right things for their campaign needs. If you can talk to them about the publishers that they know they want to engage with, and then you can show them how they can build a delivery model to route more delivery onto those publishers. Or if they know there's particular times of day, days of week they want to upweight, this is another route that they could use to do that sort of thing. Showing that you're listening to them and showing that actually there are tools that can be used to make this easier, is something that I think is generally very well received. I think the piece that everyone's sort of really fed up with is just the, no, we're not going to share with you what's going on. For advertisers where they do want some level of transparency. Of course, there are always brands who are just going to be, objective based. I don't care how you get at me, just get me the results. And then there's the sort of the camp of, we really want to understand what's working. And so I think figuring out which type of client you're dealing with, and then either, you don't need to know about this, let us take care of it, or actually this is how it works and this is what we're doing on your behalf, should be a really good strategy. Paul,
Wonderful.
did I cover that enough, do you think? Is that clear?
I think so. I
Okay.
think but more is better, and we really appreciate the detailed explanation. And the relationship with your customer is yours, and you have to figure out how to best communicate these types of things. But we're always here to help, as we're the programmatic experts. So with that, I want to thank Cadi Jones for being our host and walking us through this excellent feature. We will be double clicking more as we are planning some future development in the delivery features of the platform. We're always looking to innovate in those types of regards. So stay tuned for that. And we'll see you at the next 15 minutes with Beeswax. So in the meantime, everyone stay healthy, and we'll see you next time. Take care.